some of my favorite plugins for saturation and for, just overall timbre. We want to change the timbre a little bit. Obviously, you can't go through a Serum baseline tutorial without doing some Saturn. So let's go ahead and load up some Saturn. Probably one of the best saturation plugins. It really is a saturation / distortion unit. The difference between saturation and distortion is that one adds harmonics and another one boosts present harmonics. So slightly different, but the cool thing about Saturn is that it offers many different algorithms here for your saturation / distortion. So in one unit, we have all these different variations, but probably the most powerful part of Saturn, is that you can have multiple bands. So if I just use this plus button here and I click it, you can see we now have 2 bands. And what that means is that we can process this band differently than this band. Normally in a bass, I'll make about 4 bands. So I'm just going to make another node here, and that gives us 3 bands, and one more, and that gives us 4 bands. And that allows me a lot of control here to shape our bass line. So let's put this band somewhere around, let's do somewhere around 50. Let's do that. Something like that. The second band here is pretty important. It really dictates a lot of the tone. This crossover point is going to basically dictate where the band ends and where the band starts, right? So I really noticed that these 2 bands shape a lot of the mud. So where you might hear some inharmonic tones or some sort of flabby, bloated bass sounds, that's going to be in this area. So you got to be a little careful in placing your crossover point here. I'm going to put mine somewhere around there. Let's just move this node somewhere right here. Let's see what we got so far, just with that, unchanged. Every band here is using the warm tape. Turn it off. Back on. So you can really hear already like the warmth that you're getting from Saturn. It's just a really, really good plugin. And really quick, I'm just going to make sure that my EQ is always at the end of my signal flow there. But yeah, Serum is just, just by setting your crossover points here meticulously, you're going to get a really nice warm tone out of Serum. If I move this around, you might be able to hear, the difference. I'll just turn the drive up a little bit. Moving that band around really shapes the bass a lot. Let's leave it right there. Sounds nice. I'm going to do something kind of unconventional, and let's just do another Saturn. See what that sounds like. Except on this one, I think I'm going to do some different algorithms here. Let's talk about that. Before I do anything, I'm just going to go here to the first band, and I'm just going to turn it off. And the second band, I think I'm going to turn that one off too. Maybe I'll turn that back on, but I don't want to affect the sub or the low end of our bass line too much yet. Yeah, I just don't want to bloat it, right? And saturation distortion, adds volume, right? So I don't want to make it too fat. But let's go to this third band here, and let's use something sort of different. Let's try this destroy algorithm. And what this is a bit crusher algorithm. It kind of adds this sort of digital tone, sort of dirty digital tone. And I'm going to actually do the same thing here on the top end. And let's see what that sounds like without any edits. Okay, so you can hear the digital bit crushy tone we've added there. I'm just going to dial back a little bit on our drive just so it's not super obvious. Let's go down here, somewhere around there. And let's actually also do a little bit of less mix. Let's go somewhere around there on both of these bands here. So just to follow along, I've taken the band mix down, which is going to mix in this effects we have on this band in and out. A really cool knob there, by the way, a lot of functionality. And turn the mix down here on the top end. And let's also just turn the mix down here on the overall effect. So we're doing very subtle things here. And let's see if we got a good effect. Turn it off. I like it. Sounds good. Let me just give us a little gain here. Let's see what these bands on sound like really quick. Just going to dial the mix down a little bit here on these. Pretty cool. I'm liking it. Yeah, I'm liking it. Sounds pretty good. I think let's talk about a plugin here that is a bit, I don't know, speculative whether it's a good plugin or not. It's a plugin that a lot of people used to use back in, I'd say like 2008 and before. It's quite an old plugin. It's called RBass. Debatable whether people like it or not, but I usually end up using it here and there. It's a little bit tough to use because it's sort of a harmonic booster, right? It adds a sine wave at whatever frequency that you put it at here. And I think the important thing to note about this plugin is that it's very easy, right? There's only 3 faders here, but you got to use it right, because if you don't, then you can just have, a catastrophe basically with your mix. If you just look at the frequency here, essentially we need to put a sine wave or an added harmonic at the fundamental. A way to find out the fundamental of D sharp, which is our notes here, you can just go to a frequency note chart. You can find that on Google here. Just type freak note chart. And under the images, you'll find a whole bunch of different ones. I like to use this one, and I actually utilize frequency note charts throughout my production often. So I have the image saved here on my desktop, and you can see what this is a roadmap essentially of where the notes resonate in the frequency band. So C octave 0 resonates at a frequency of 16.35. The second octave resonates at 32, and so forth, right? So this is showing you that a note can be represented by frequency. So if we're doing D sharp as our root note, as our fundamental, then we know that we can set this sine wave in RBass to any one of these frequencies. So I'm going to use one of these, the second octave 1 and octave 2, to add a harmonic. Octave 0 would be pointless, right? Because it's so low, we already cut out 19 hertz, so there's no reason to add a harmonic there. Even 38 is a tad low, really. It's we might end up shaving that off. So let's try 77. Open up RBass, and we're, again, make sure that Pro Q3 is at the very end. By the way, you can use any EQ. It doesn't have to be Pro Q3. I'm just using it because it's in my arsenal and I tend to use it a lot. You can follow along with any EQ. Let's go back here. We're just going to double click there. We're going to type 77. Another important thing with RBass is that you really don't want to use it pretty loud. You kind of dial this down a little bit. Let's go all the way down, somewhere around here. Let's see what that sounds like. Let's turn it off, see what it sounds like. Turn on. It really adds this sort of warm, round, sort of rich low end to the track, but you just need to make sure you're using it right. That's sort of the main downfall I see when people are using RBass, is they don't really understand where to put the frequency. And if you put the frequency at an inharmonic frequency, then it just sounds like rubbish. It sounds like fatter, and a little bit bigger, but just something weird about it. It just doesn't sound good. So make sure that you use that frequency note chart and choose a harmonic frequency. And remember just to turn it down a bit. It just, sounds a little bit better. So sounding pretty nice already. But let's see what else we can do here. I'm going to shape the bass a little bit with some transient designer. One I really like is Trans X Wide or Multi. Forget. Yeah, Multi. From Waves. Really, really good plugin. It's a transient shaper. So the transient is the loudest start point of the sound. So if you look at the kick here, this is a transient right there, the beginning of the kick, right? This is the body, and this beginning part is the transient. So this transient shaper is a way that you can shape that first initial click on your bass with a little bit more control. And it does it through compression, I'm pretty sure, this plugin. And let's just go ahead and set it up how I normally do it here. I like to set this low point to 80. By default, mine's already there. And I might move that around a little bit, but an important thing is I really don't want to shape the transients of my low and low mid band. I'm going to try and preserve that smooth sine wave, that smooth low end in my bass as much as possible. Let's just mess with this a little bit, see what we can get. I'm going to move that top band, the high band down a little bit, and let's just keep this sort of high mid sort of high. Let's see what that sounds like. Turn it off. It's nice, this tone that it adds after adding, sort of bloating the bass with RBass. This Trans X makes it a little more rubbery. It makes the pluck of the bass sound very organic in a way. This combination here, RBass into Trans X, is really, really powerful. It sounds amazing on the dance floor. Super good. I think one of the last things I'm going to do with this bass here is just a little bit of EQ. Just sort of whip it in the shape, lean it into a more harmonic tone. And I'm going to do that with another one of my favorite plugins, and that's HEQ. That's another plugin from Waves. I'm going to make sure that I put the HEQ before Pro Q3. Let's talk about why I like this plugin. I mean, all the EQs have a tonality to them. It's just the nature of EQ. They're all programmed differently, and a lot of them have a character to them on purpose. It gives them a tone that makes them sound desirable, really. The cool thing about this plugin is that it has several different algorithms for each band. So all these sound unique and work differently from each other. For this instance, I'm just going to do a little bit of hunt and kill. So I'll show you what that means in a moment, but I'm just going to turn off all the other bands that I'm not using. This is sort of a habitual thing I do with all EQs, just turning off bands I'm not using as much as possible. And I'm going to just use this digital 2 algorithm, mostly because for hunt and kill, it's the most accurate, so that I can sort of find that inharmonic tone to shape this bass a little bit better. Turn up the gain here on this band, and then steepen this slope a bit. And I'm going to sweep up and down here on the frequency band and find something that sounds inharmonic. And I'm going to pull that out slowly. So let's see what I can find. Yeah, here's something right here. So this sort of hunt and kill technique is a little hard to describe really, but essentially as I'm sliding up the frequency band, you'll notice boosts in the audio. And sometimes the boost is harmonic. Like sometimes you pass over, a D sharp harmonic, which is our fundamental. And obviously it's going to be a little bit louder, right? But occasionally you'll find some other notes that are also boosted and they just don't work well. They don't gel well with our root note. But essentially what I'm going to do is just turn this volume down there just a little bit. Let's do something like this. And I'm going to widen my cue ever so slightly. And see how that sounds. All right, let's turn on another node here. Let's go to digital. Let's do the same thing. Steep cue, high volume. Let's sort of see if we can find another inharmonic frequency. You can hear it there. You just hear this sort of hollowy hum hoo hoo sound there, and I feel like that's just inharmonic with our bass line. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Let's do something like that. And every time I hunt and kill, I like to make sure I widen my cue a little bit, because the steeper the cue, the more that you hear the band, the more that you hear the EQ. And I kind of want to make this a bit transparent, this processing. I don't want to change the bass. I just want to whip it into shape is what I like to call it. I want to make it as clean as possible. And I want to focus the tone on the fundamental, on D. You'll definitely find that as you add things like saturation plugins and harmonic boosters, all these things, that they sort of blur the tone a little bit. They blur the fundamental. They add a lot of cool character, but you end up sort of losing the picture a little bit. So these sort of hunt and kill techniques help you to hone in back on that root note. Let's just do one more here. And I'm going to do the same thing, digital 2, steep cue, turn up my volume. Let's see what else I can come up with. Somewhere right there. I'm basically looking for the loudest point of that inharmonic whoo sound, right? As I go up and down in that small range I'm working in here, there's going to be the loudest point of that tone. And I want to sort of find that and then just dial that back a little bit. So let's do the same thing. Let's just pull this out a little bit, ever so slightly. Let's go somewhere around here. And then again, widen my cue a little bit. And you see all these, the decibel levels that I'm pulling stuff out is, very subtle. I don't want to be too, crazy with my EQing here. Let's get out. Nice. Digging it. Sounding very, very cool. Let's just loop this over. And we got a bar going on here. And I think one of the final things I'm going to do here is a little side chaining. So I'm going to use LFO tool, fan favorite for everybody. Great side chaining effect here. Much easier than setting up the ins and outs of a compressor. you just use this volume shaper to shape the sort of pumping effect that you want. So how this works is quite simple. You know, when the node is all the way up, there's full volume. As you pull these nodes down, you get less volume until there's 0. So if I just look at our bass here under the oscilloscope, you can see that the bass trails, the tail of it trails into where the kick is. So this is the bass line. This is it running. You can kind of see that the bass is running into itself, actually. And you can tell that mostly because at the end here, when the cycle resets, you get this tail. So what we're getting here is we're getting some phase discrepancy here with the kick. I'll describe what phase is in a moment here, but essentially we don't want any audio happening at the beginning of where the kick is. We don't want to overlap the kick and the bass. We want them to work together. So I know already I'm going to pull out that node, and I'm actually going to double click here and just make sure that that node is fully down. I'm going to move this one over because this second node here is going to dictate sort of the sidechain effect that I want. And I might even move this over a little bit more, somewhere around there. And I know that it's muted right now, so you can't hear it, but basically what we did was we cleaned up that tail. Oftentimes, this LFO tool will have a little clicking on it, especially when you're pulling the volume all the way out here. So you got to move this node over a little bit, ever so slightly, and you can use this slope to soften that fade. But let's see what we got now. I'm just going to unmute everything, and we're going to get a little bit of a pumping effect. So it's sounding pretty cool. Let's just turn this off and see what it sounds like. Turn it back on. I'm going to play with this node here, right, and try and get something a little more groovy. If I do this extreme, you'll really hear this pumping effect. I think there's a happy medium here with sidechain. It's a great way to add some groove to your bass line. It's also a great thing to do when you need to change your bass line up a little bit. You know, you can put a little LFO tool on a certain part of the track, and then on another part of the track it can just be running, you know, machine gun style. I think I'm going to do a little bit of both, a little machine gunny groove going on here. It's these subtle things that really make the track pump and sound a little bit more humanized as well. I think that's a nice blend right there. So let's talk about phase really quick. I don't know if we're having any phase discrepancies currently. I actually don't think we are, but I want to talk to you guys about it anyways because it's interesting food for thought. Let's just grab both of our tracks here and group them. Command G, and I'm going to just rename this kick and bass. Let's use LFO tool again for our oscilloscope. I'm going to just move these nodes all the way up so we can use just the oscilloscope. And let's take a look at our bass. So right now I have the oscilloscope opened from the kick and bass group. So there's this area right here where the kick and the bass are going to overlap. And you can see that there's a little bit of weird latency occurring in this group processing. And I found this to occur depending on how many post-processing plugins I have in the project. You know, essentially this area should be moved over because that's where the kick is. If I just play it back for you, you'll see. But basically what we're looking at is we're looking at this overlap point. So the point where the kick and the bass overlap just naturally over each other due to the tails. right? You see that our body of the kick is overlapping over the bass. We want to try and limit any discrepancies that's happening. So there's a couple ways to fix that. The classic way back in the day is just do a really extreme side chain as to pull out this note as much as possible, or lessen the volume so that there's no issue between the tail of the kick. Another classic way that you still hear in a lot of sort of dark side is just making a really short kick here so that the tails don't interfere with each other. And let's hear what that sounds like. It works. It's a good classic way of doing it. But the kick, when you listen to it by itself, I feel that it needs that tail. It needs that time to open up, especially in dark prog, where we're working with 140, 138, 136. These sort of BPMs allow for a lot of room in between the kicks. So we kind of want that tail in the kick. And let's listen to the kick closed by itself. See how that sounds. Let's just open it up all the way now. You really get that whoom, that the sub from the kick is happening really right here. That body is just barely opening up to its fullest amplitude. So I want to preserve that as much as possible. So really the best and surefire way to deal with the phase of the tails is either in the synth, or a quick and dirty way would be with this plugin PHA 979. And I'm going to make sure that it is at the end of the signal flow there. This is a really easy plugin. I like to just turn off the left and the right, so force it to mono, and that just gives us 3 knobs. So super easy to work with here. We got the delay, the phase, and the output. Let's talk about phase cancellation for a moment here, okay? So if I was to show you an over-exaggerated example of phase cancellation, I'm just going to do it with the kick here, and I am going to go ahead and open up the utility plugin from Ableton. And on the second kick, I'm just going to go over here and just invert the phase here. So essentially what we have is a mirrored image, a mirrored phase image of the kicks on top of each other. And I'm just going to leave these both playing, and let's just turn off the bass here. And I'm going to play it back, and we're going to hear no sound. Okay, you can see over here that the channels are playing audio. So there's actually data being played, but you can't hear anything out of the speakers. And that's just due to physics, basically. We're emulating a phase cancellation here, and we're noticing the nature of physics, of the sound, of the vibration, canceling itself out. If I just turn off one of the kicks, let's turn off the other one. So as you can see, there's actually audio playing, but the phases of each other are canceling each other out. They're actually canceling each other out so much that we're not getting any volume. We're getting full phase cancellation. And that's because those two phases are overlapping with each other. So we were talking about transients before, right? Transient at the beginning. This, peaks and falls here, that is the phase. So when these two relationships are not working that well together, you're bound to get cancellation or just discrepancies with the phase too. So if we just, let's just delete our second kick there. And let's flatten our bass really quick. Just going to turn it up here so I can see the waveform a little bit better. So you can see we're getting that overlapping relationship here in our kick and bass happening right here. So we need to make sure that the relationship between these phases and these phases are working together nicely so that we don't get something that's nearing phase cancellation or just nearing something that sounds weird, basically. Because essentially, if we were to cancel out this part of the kick, then we would get the same exact effect that we talked about just a moment ago, where we don't get the tail, where we just basically delete the tail right out of there. And that's going to change the the rolling feel. You know, it's going to change that glue, because you really want that kick to play all the way through, and you want the bass to be joined with that sub from the kick. You don't want it to be two separate things, because then it sounds disjointed in a way. You want it to sound like one instrument. So this knob here literally moves the entire signal forwards or backwards, and that allows us to align the start point with the phase of the kick. So you want to align the bass to the kick at this point, especially. What the phase knob does is quite interesting. It doesn't move the input forwards and backwards, but it sort of cycles through the phase of it, and that allows you to really glue the two phases together. So let me just play it and move this phase knob. So you can see the start point remains here, but we're just cycling through the phase, and it's essentially sort of looping itself in a way and cycling through different parts of the phase. And that's going to really allow us to glue the kick and the bass together. So I'm just going to do this by ear, and it's really hard to convey how to do this properly, especially because there's no one way to do this. It's going to depend on the kick you choose and the bass line, the synthesis, the note, the processing. All these things are going to come into play, and they're going to give you a different phase. And though the phase of your bass and the phase of the kick are going to differ between each relationship, right? So there's no like one way to do it. I'm going to try and align my phase right now, but this won't work for another combination of sounds. Essentially, what I'm trying to listen for is the tail of the kick to continue all the way through. So I'm going to turn up my speakers a little bit, and I want to just first off listen to the kick, and I'm mostly going to listen to this part of the kick, the end of the kick, and I want to listen for that vibration, for it to sort of open up. I'm going to move around both the delay and the phase knob until I can hear that tail continuing all the way through, so completing its journey. A really easy way to do this is to first align your delay. So make sure that your start point is at a place where you like, and then throw it way out of phase. So mess with this knob to the point where it sounds like crap, okay? And then dial back until you get a nice area. And I'm going to do this right now for you, and let's see if I can get something sounding good. You always have to have your oscilloscope on your group, because we're going to want to look at the kick and the bass together in order to sort of chase the phase, is what the term is called. So to realign it so that they sound basically in unison together. So let's just watch these two things and sort of figure out something. And an easy way to see the discrepancy between the tail and the first part of the bass is to turn off your LFO tool. So do not sidechain. We want it to be full volume right when that overlap occurs. My start point is pretty good now. I just moved it forward a little bit. And let's start to dial with the phase. And I'm going to do the same thing. Like I said, I'm going to throw it way out of phase, whether that's positive polarity or negative polarity. And I'm going to just dial back until I hear it matching. I'm going to just press B, and that allows us to change the settings here, and then A, B, the two settings. can also hear that as we mess with the phase here, we're getting different tonalities, right? Which is one reason why we want to make sure that when we're doing our low cuts here, that we have linear phase mode on, because that means that the phase is not altered so much. So every time you add an effect, it alters the phase, right? Slightly. So this final effect here, we're going to make sure we're not altering the phase too much. Because we want to get to this point where we can sort of alter the phase on demand. So as we sort of desire it to. I'm going to just mess with this a little bit more. I'm going to get two sort of different versions, and I'm going to decide which one preserves the tail of that kick a little bit. I have B, which is positive polarity on these knobs here. And then I have A, which is very slightly less delay, but way more positive polarity in the phase. I'm actually hearing that this sounds really nice, and you can tell when the phase is being, when the phase discrepancy is being taken care of, because oftentimes phase cancellation or phase problems in the oscilloscope result in a large boost in the image. So if I go back here to my B settings, we're getting a boost in the image right here. And when I go back to the A, it's a little bit less volume. So that's something that I just noticed after doing this for years, is that you can look at it visually if you'd like to sort of understand where it's better in phase. So I think we're sounding pretty good here, actually. Let me just put our LFO tool back in there. And let's see what it sounds like. I'm actually liking that a lot. Sounds really good. I just want to do one more quick thing, and that is throw an EQ here on our kick. Sort of match it a little bit better. I want to find an area in the kick that sounds kind of slappy and hollow. I'm hearing that there's a little bit of battle happening with the kick and the bass. So let me just hunt and kill. There we go. That's sort of a slappy tone. I'm just going to pull that out a little bit. Second thing I'm going to do is find out where the loudest fundamental harmonic is in the kick. And I kind of want the kick and the bass to gel together. I don't want the kick to be, way more subbier than the bass. I don't want the bass to be more subby than the kick. So I'm going to sort of cut them off at a similar range here. So if I look down here in the frequency range, I can see that the kick is at its loudest point right here. So that would be G sharp 1 is where the kick is sort of resonating. And nice little rule of thumb is I know that means in my bass or in my Pro Q3 here, I'm just going to cut this off right at that cutoff point where the kick was resonating at. So I'll just do something like right here, G1. And let's hear what that sounds like. I'm liking it. Lastly, let's just go back to the mixer here, and I just want to make sure our levels are good. Little rule of thumb is I like the bass to be around between 2 and 5 decibels lower than the kick. I want the kick to be a little bit louder because that is the main beat, right? That's the main sort of driving rhythm that the dance floor listens to is the kick. If the kick is too quiet than the bass, then it's hard to sort of dance to it, right? So my rule of thumb again is between 2 and 5 decibels below the kick. Let's start at 2 and see what that sounds like. And I'm just going to refresh the kick here. You see we're on the kick layer right here. So already we're about 6 decibels below the kick. Let me just turn that up a little bit, the bass. go, about 4 decibel difference, and that leaves us with the the kick rhythm still there, but the bass is subtly filling up that range in between. So this sounds pretty good. I'm digging it actually. A couple more things we can do with this bass is check out some different bass line grooves. So let me just duplicate one MIDI note over and a kick over, and let's sort of see some other usable grooves. So there's obviously the double bass, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's 2 basses. So pretty good already. I'm digging it. Let's try an offbeat bass. So that means removing all of the bass notes except for the middle one, and let's just extend it all the way over and see what that sounds like. This offbeat bass is really popularized by the dark progressive and Xenon. Definitely the essence of sort of the classic Xenon sound is the offbeat. I use it a lot in my music. I'm sure you guys know. It's one of my favorites. It's very reminiscent of classic, electronic dance music, really from the 90s and 80s and 90s, really. Let's do one more little groove here, just so we know all of them. We know what's at our fingertips here. Let's open up this piano roll and go down to triplet grid. And I'm going to set the triplet grid to the 8th notes. And if you see, there's only 2 available places after the kick to put our bass line. Let's see what that sounds like. I just utilized those 2 8th notes right there. Pretty nice. So I'm sure we all know the triplets groove, and hate it or not, whatever. Now you know how to do it. I actually think it's funny to dog on triplets, but you can make a cool song in triplets. I have some, so they don't have to all be cheesy like some music is. Anyways, let's see what else we can do with this bass line. I want to make a couple different articulations with the bass now that we have our basic building blocks here. So let me just click on Serum. I'm going to duplicate it down. I'm going to turn off that other serum for now. And let's make some womps, or some bass farts. So I'm just going to click on this MIDI note, extend it all the way so that it's entirety filling up the whole range there. I'm going to get a kick and duplicate that over. And at the moment, we're going to hear sort of a long note. Let's see what it sounds like. Pretty nice. We're hearing some pumping effect happening due to the LFO still there, but I think I just want to go into our envelope here and open up the sustain a little bit. Nice. I'm digging it. I'm going to turn the cutoff down a little bit. Let's also open up the cutoff amount. Let's do a little more volume here on the master. Digging it. That's pretty cool. Let's actually just open up the cutoff a lot, and just so we can hear what's going on. So there's kind of a cool articulation. Let's see what else we can do. Let me just click on the bass here and duplicate it down. And let's just move that over. Duplicate our kick. And let's see what else we can do with the bass. Use the envelope 2 again. And I'm just going to do the opposite here. Let me just click that little thing there. And let's do a little attack. See what that sounds like. Digging it. Nice. See what that sounds like. Digging it. Let's see if we make maybe we can make a little groove here. Pretty cool. Digging it. Sounds nice. Maybe we can do sort of like a wobble at the end. I'm going to click on this serum, duplicate it down, remove the overlapping MIDI notes. Yeah, maybe I'll extend this note out. So maybe I'll just do it this way, actually. Make sure it loops off so I can extend that. Make a loop cycle there. And yeah, so a wobble. Let's try that. You know, it's popularized in other genres, techno and dubstep. Instead of using our envelopes here, like we were doing, let's use LFO. And let's do an LFO on the cutoff. So previously we had envelope 2 on the cutoff, but now we're going to add LFO 1 to the cutoff. And let's just see what we can make. So there's a lot of coolness we can do here with LFOs. Essentially what we're doing is we're adding a shape that the cutoff is going to go on, and the speed of that cycle that it plays the shape at is going to be dependent on this rate here. So I'm just going to fool around with this a little bit and see what I can get. I mean, this is already pretty cool. Digging it. I've made some tracks that have that for sure. Let's move the rate up a little bit. Nice. That sounds pretty cool. Let's see if we can get that to work with our little groove we made here. Nice. Let's actually change this one up a little bit. So all I did was drag LFO1 to the cutoff, as you remember, and I changed the rate. Let's do something different. Let's do an 8th note, and maybe we can change the shape a little bit here. Go into the folders and let's choose sine wave. Let's try something slower. Nice, digging it. Let's try triplet mode. Let's try dotted. Interesting. Interesting. Let's try triplets. Mess with the cutoff a little bit. That's kind of cool. Let's also open up this amount. Let's try a different rate. Very interesting.